John McCrae.
Hold still.
Tents where McCrae operated early in the war gave way to bunkers, better to protect the wounded from German shell fire. Now it's all part of a memorial to a poem marking the spot where a Canadian battlefield surgeon spent 15 minutes scribbling a few lines of poetry.
I'm not sure what to say to Canadians. Dr. Colonel McCrae, he's fundamental to us. The poem is fundamental. It inspired both.
Sandy Gow is descended from John McCrae.
What's the most interesting is how honest he was about his feelings towards the war. He said to his mother, I don't want to go. He had been to the Boer War already. He knew what it was, and he said, I'm afraid, but I feel as a Canadian and as a bachelor that I have an obligation to go and fight. And I think he was always really burdened by that sense of responsibility, and he always felt that whatever he was sacrificing was never quite enough.
The poem is prompted by the death of a young friend, a protege of McCrae he taught at McGill. As his commanding officer, McCrae conducts the burial service.
We commit to the soil the mortal remains of Alexander Harmer. May he rest in peace.
It's a nice thought to see him perhaps in a one quiet moment resting, thinking about his friend. And
in Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved. And now we lie in Flanders fields.
And then he becomes undoctor-like. He becomes belligerent. He becomes defiant. He seeks revenge.
Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
And you can say, well, that's not really that Canadian, the way we've been taught now. Doctor, humanitarian, loves his fellow man. It's not. It's Colonel McCrae, a gunner, a Canadian fighting here who's just lost his friend, and he reacts as a man would. He reacts the way a soldier would. Take up our quarrel with the foe.
It's almost like we should have all of the youth of Canada stand here, and then they'll finally understand in Flanders fields. I take the last verse differently than I've ever taken it before, standing here now. Kind of like what you were saying, where you just suddenly, you felt closer to him than you'd ever before. And the torch that he's holding up, or torch that we are supposed to hold up, is really illuminating the darkest parts of the war.
A few words of encouragement Canon Scott utters before this battle comes back to haunt him.
Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Before the battle, I passed down the line and told them they had a chance to do a bigger thing for Canada than had ever been done before. The words later became a watchword, for the men said that whenever I told them that, it meant that half of them were going to get killed.
Frankie Boston is an expert on the battles of Flanders fields.
In that very narrow area on the Ypres front, there are, on German, French and the British side, about 200,000 men are missing. Now, about half of them has a grave in the cemeteries. A soldier of the Great War. There is a grave, but we don't know who is in it. And the other 100,000, they're just somewhere here, somewhere under the fields.
For as much as it hath pleased Almighty God of his great mercy to take unto himself the souls of our dear brothers here departed, we therefore commit their bodies to the ground. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Of the 12,000 soldiers in the Canadian 1st Division, 6,000 are killed, wounded, or missing. 2,000 have no known grave.
This belt buckle, the ground surrendered it for you. This is the God of War's offering to you this day. It came out of the ground this morning, picked up by the farmer as he plowed the field, because the earth often surrenders her treasures at the oddest times, and it's still shiny. Someone's belt buckle, perhaps from an officer, Sam Brown, who fought and died, or perhaps fought and was wounded, but right here, right in this area. So this is our first introduction, our grad ball to World War I. We arrive, we are hit with the foulest sort of and latest scientific marvel. Talk about shock and awe in Iraq. This is shock and awe at a big scale. This is not just a German division attacking, it's a couple of armies preceded by pretty hot corps with their finest troops. And the Canadian division, untested, untried, stands, fights, and holds. And we had fallen, there is Paris, about a day and a half away. You know, the final breakthrough. So this was, to everyone concerned, an important battle, and a battle I think we're justifiably proud of.
This column marks the battlefield where 18,000 Canadians withstood the first German gas attacks, the 22nd to 24th of April, 1915. "2,000 are buried nearby with no known grave."
And these guys, they did it, you know? Like, they held the line. And they were tough. There was the solidarity in that group of people, those thousands of soldiers, to stay there. They must have known the strategic importance of that spot. They had to keep it. And they pissed in their shirts and whatever they did to be able to withstand that attack. Go into a counterattack the day after, facing that weird weapon. You know? That I think that defines tough.
So you guys know so much, and it's just so refreshing to know how much love you have for this country. And I've really forgotten that.
Let me just do it.
I feel quite triumphant. I have succeeded in my venture to draw you into the vortex of my correspondence. When you accuse your hair of being red, and your eyes nondescript gray, and your complexion freckled, I can accuse you of false modesty. I understand you possess chameleon hair and eyes. You confess to a fondness for ice cream sodas. Hail, fellow mortal. Well met, kindred spirit. May we someday cluster around a fountain. My tongue is flannel at the thought. This morning, as I came up the steps of my dugout, I saw a little green bunch of clover and was reminded that I had not thanked you for the four-leafed ones that you sent me.
It wasn't all war all the time. No army could afford to fight all the time. So days, sometimes weeks, would go by with no action.
I am living in an old